It was supposed to be just another routine mission for the galactic explorers. A small, barely habitable planet on the fringes of the galaxy, its coordinates hardly raised any alarms. But when the little DeathWorlder shuttle descended into Earth's atmosphere, everything changed. The air was thick with a strange electric tension, the kind that felt almost alive. The planet, with its lush green forests and sprawling oceans, seemed deceptively calm at first glance. Yet, those who dared venture here, those who explored its surface, always came back with the same chilling report. Earth was unlike any world they had ever encountered. The species that called Earth home had a reputation for being fierce, unpredictable, and ruthless. To the rest of the galaxy, Earth was a myth, a dark legend whispered about in hushed tones. It wasn't until this small, wide-eyed explorer set foot on the planet's surface that the truth would finally come to light. What the DeathWorlder would uncover on that fateful journey would send shockwaves across the galaxy, forever altering the way the universe viewed humanity. The DeathWorlder was young, barely an adult by the standards of their species, but their curiosity had always been insatiable. While others of their kind remained cautious and fearful of the notorious reputation Earth carried, this explorer was different. Their species, too, had been shaped by survival in a harsh environment, but nothing could have prepared them for the raw intensity of Earth's nature. With every step they took, they uncovered fragments of the truth, clues that painted a haunting picture of a world that was as dangerous as it was resilient. The creature's senses were overwhelmed by the life force of Earth. Every plant, every animal, every drop of water teeming with an energy that seemed to pulse in the air itself. There was no mistaking it. Earth was a living orgasm in its own right, and it was fighting, clawing, and breathing with every fiber of its being. As the DeathWorlder ventured deeper into the unknown, they were confronted by a force far greater than they ever expected. The very planet itself was a battleground. They watched in awe and horror as the creatures of Earth, from the smallest insect to the fiercest predator, fought to survive in an environment that seemed to want nothing more than to destroy them. It wasn't just the natural world they encountered, but a planet that demanded constant adaptation, evolution, and sheer willpower to overcome. Every moment on Earth was a fight for life, whether it was against predators, diseases, or the merciless weather. And yet, through it all, the human race had flourished. The DeathWorlder had heard the stories, but now, standing on the surface, they began to understand the truth. Earth had been called DeathWorld, not just because of its deadly flora and fauna, but because it had shaped humanity in ways that were unimaginable. The humans who had survived here were not mere survivors. They were warriors, evolving and adapting with every challenge, every loss, and every victory. As the explorer journeyed deeper, they discovered something that would forever change their understanding of humanity. Hidden beneath the surface was an ancient history, a history of wars, struggles, and victories. The DeathWorlder had always believed their species had faced the harshest trials, but now they were beginning to see that humanity had weathered storms of unimaginable scale. From the dawn of their civilization, humans had been pushed to the brink of extinction countless times. Yet, against all odds, they had endured. The young explorer found themselves standing before the remnants of a once great city, now a crumbling ruin, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. They could feel the echoes of battles long past, the blood spilled in defense of Earth and its people. They wondered, how had this small, seemingly fragile species with no natural armor, no inborn strength, managed to survive against all the odds? What had made them so resilient, so capable of survival in a world that wanted to destroy them? In the distance, a towering storm loomed, its ferocity unmatched by anything the DeathWorlder had ever seen. Thunder cracked through the air, and the wind howled like a living beast, but it didn't faze the explorer. Instead, they realized something profound. The true meaning of Earth's name wasn't in the violence of its environment alone. It was in how the humans, despite it all, refused to yield. The Earth had been a proving ground for humanity, a place where only the strongest survive. It wasn't just the predators or the natural disasters that shaped them, but their unyielding will to survive, to fight, to adapt, and to never give up. What the DeathWorlder had discovered was not just a world of danger, but a world where life itself was a test, and only the most determined could claim victory. The true nature of DeathWorld, they realized, wasn't about death, it was about life. It was about how life persisted against all odds, how it found a way even in the face of annihilation. But just as they were beginning to piece together the meaning behind the legend of DeathWorld, the ground beneath their feet trembled. The storm in the distance had turned into something far more dangerous. It wasn't just the planet's fierce nature anymore. It was a warning. Something was coming, something far greater than the DeathWorlder had prepared for. And in that moment, they realized that the fight for Earth, the fight for humanity's survival, was far from over. The explorers stood alone, looking out over the horizon, their heart pounding with a mixture of awe and fear. Truth of Earth had been revealed, but now a new chapter was about to unfold. One that would determine whether humanity's resilience could overcome the looming threat on the horizon, or whether the legend of DeathWorld would claim its final, devastating victory. The DeathWorlder stood motionless, staring into the distance, the storm's ominous approach slowly filling the sky with a blood-red hue. The planet's violent atmosphere seemed to react to its presence, as if Earth itself was aware of the coming force. But it wasn't just the weather that was unsettling. There was something deeper, an unseen pressure in the air, an unnatural stillness in the underbrush that made the young explorer's senses go on high alert. Earth had been harsh, yes, but it was also full of life, of thriving ecosystems that teemed with vibrant, unpredictable forces. And yet now, everything felt different. The world seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for something. The small, agile creature had always been observant, trained to detect shifts in the environment that others might miss. It was why they had been chosen for this mission, despite their youth and inexperience. Their species had evolved in similar conditions, adapting to violent worlds where survival was a daily battle. But this was unlike anything they had ever encountered. The sense of imminent danger wasn't just the storm, it was something else. A presence. A looming threat that lingered just beyond the horizon, waiting for the right moment to strike. In the distance, the remnants of a long-abandoned human settlement seemed to mock the explorers' uncertainty. A city, once full of life, now reduced to crumbled ruins. The buildings were weathered and decayed, overrun by the very forces of nature the humans had fought so hard to tame. It was as if the world itself had risen up to reclaim what had once been conquered. Yet, there was something strange about this ruin, something unsettling. The DeathWorlder had studied human history, or at least the fragments of it that had survived. Humanity's stories were legendary across the galaxy, filled with tales of their wars, their victories, and their near destruction at the hands of their own recklessness. They had survived wars, plagues, and the rise and fall of empires. But in the end, it wasn't their technology or their weapons that had preserved them, it was their spirit. The will to survive, no matter the cost. And yet, standing in the shadow of the crumbling human structures, the DeathWorlder felt something cold seep into their thoughts. They had been prepared for a harsh environment, for battles fought against predators and elements alike. But they hadn't been prepared for the feeling of loss that seemed to hang over the place, an emptiness that made it impossible to shake the sense that something critical had been lost, something vital to Earth's survival. The explorer's curiosity burned brighter than ever. What had truly happened here? Why had this place, once a thriving hub of human life, fallen into ruin? As the DeathWorlder crouched next to a decaying wall, their eyes scanning the markings on the faded concrete, a chill ran down their spine. The symbols were familiar, but unsettling in their own right. They had seen them in old texts, in stories of ancient human rituals, but never in person. There were references to war and survival, but also to something more, a deep, hidden connection to the planet itself, a force that seemed to transcend mere survival. The words whispered of the Earth's own resilience, but they also hinted at something darker, something buried deep beneath the surface. The air was growing thick with the approaching storm. The wind howled louder, and yet there was an eerie silence in the surroundings, as if the wildlife itself had retreated into hiding. The DeathWorlder's instincts screamed for them to leave, to seek shelter before the worst of the tempest hit. But they couldn't. Something was pulling them forward, urging them to uncover the truth, to understand what had truly driven humanity to evolve the way they had. What had made them so capable of surviving in a world that seemed determined to destroy them? As the young explorer trekked deeper into the ruins, their mind raced with the possibilities. Was Earth's harshness just an accident of nature? Or was it a deliberate test, a challenge set before the human race to prove their worth? The questions gnawed at them, each one leading to more uncertainty. They had heard of the ancient human mythos, tales of gods and titans, of beings that had shaped the world and set humanity on its path. But there was something about Earth that didn't fit into these stories, something far more terrifying and real. Suddenly, a crackling sound pierced the silence. The DeathWorlder froze, their heart racing. It was a noise that didn't belong in this place, like the faint hum of machinery buried beneath the ground. Their ears twitched, and their eyes darted to the source of the sound. It was coming from below, deep within the earth. The explorer's pulse quickened, and they crouched low, their hand resting on the cool, cracked surface beneath them. The hum grew louder, vibrating through their bones. Something, or someone, was beneath them, alive, waiting, stirring in the depths of Earth's forgotten corners. For a long moment, they stood in stunned silence, the weight of their discovery pressing in on them. The mysteries of Earth had always seemed endless, but now they were beginning to feel the magnitude of what they had stumbled upon. The planet wasn't just harsh and unforgiving, it was hiding something that had been buried for ages. A force older than any of the civilizations that had risen and fallen on its surface. It was as if the very soil of Earth held secrets too dangerous for anyone to uncover. Without thinking, the DeathWorlder pressed their hand against the ground. The vibrations surged through them, and a sudden surge of energy blasted from beneath the Earth's surface. It was like nothing they had ever felt before, raw, primal, almost sentient. The ground shook violently, and the explorer stumbled back, barely managing to regain their balance as the earth around them cracked and groaned. Something was awakening. Something that had been buried for a reason. The storm overhead was no longer just a distant threat. It had turned into something far more menacing, as if the planet itself was gearing up for battle. The DeathWorlder felt a sharp pang of fear, but their curiosity pushed them forward despite the danger. There was no turning back now. They had come to Earth for answers, and they were going to find them, no matter the cost. As the storm raged and the earth trembled beneath their feet, the DeathWorlder realized they were no longer just an observer in this strange, wild world. They had become part of it, swept up in a much larger story, one that had been unfolding long before they had arrived. The secrets of Earth were beginning to reveal themselves, and with every moment, the explorer knew that they were standing on the precipice of something far greater than they could ever have imagined. But with it, a question remained. Would humanity's resilience, its ability to endure, be enough to face what lay beneath the surface? The ground cracked again, louder this time. The storm screamed in fury, and somewhere, deep below, something stirred in response. The storm above raged, twisting and roaring, as though it too had come alive in response to the disturbances below. The wind howled through the ruins, snapping twisted metal and sending dust swirling in every direction. The DeathWorlder felt the ground tremble once more, a low, rumbling vibration that seemed to come from deep beneath the planet's surface. It was as if Earth itself was alive, waking from a long slumber, stretching its limbs and shaking off centuries of dust. With every passing second, the tension in the air grew thicker. The storm was no longer just a natural disaster. It had become part of something larger, something more primal. The DeathWorlder's senses were on high alert, their every instinct screaming for them to run. But they couldn't. Not now. Not when they had come this far. And certainly not when the very earth beneath them was shaking with energy, as if urging them to uncover its secret. The hum from deep below grew louder, now accompanied by strange rhythmic pulses, like the beat of a heart or the sound of something stirring in the depths. The explorers' breath hitched as they realized the source of the noise wasn't just one thing, but many. There were thousands. Perhaps millions of movements, echoing in perfect synchrony, as though the earth itself was speaking to them, giving them a cryptic warning. What had they awoken? What ancient force lay buried beneath the surface? The DeathWorlder's heart raced, but their curiosity pushed them forward, despite the overwhelming sense of impending doom. They crouched low, their eyes scanning the ground, looking for any sign of movement. And then the earth shifted again, this time, violently. The ground beneath their feet cracked open, sending a shockwave that knocked the explorer off balance. They hit the ground with a grunt, rolling to the side as the earth split wide open, revealing a gaping chasm. A dark abyss stared back at them, its depths unfathomable, stretching far beyond the reach of their vision. From within the chasm, the pulses grew more intense, as though something was rising from the depths. The DeathWorlder's blood ran cold as they realized the true scale of what they were witnessing. This was no natural event. This was no random disaster. This was deliberate. The planet itself was awakening, and whatever lay beneath was something humanity had long feared. The DeathWorlder scrambled to their feet, their heart pounding in their chest. The storm above reached its peak, unleashing torrents of rain and wind that made it almost impossible to see. Yet, through the mist and chaos, they could make out shapes twisting, writhing shapes emerging from the chasm. Massive tendrils, dark as night, snaked their way upward, each one reaching higher, stretching toward the sky like the fingers of a giant hand. The DeathWorlder stumbled backward, barely able to keep their footing as the tendrils coiled and writhed with terrifying speed, their movements almost hypnotic. There was no mistaking it now. This wasn't some natural phenomenon. This was something alive, something ancient, and it was waking up. With every passing second, the storm grew fiercer, the wind howling as it collided with the rising tendrils. The DeathWorlder felt the immense power of the storm, the earth, and the awakening force beneath them. It was as if all the elements of Earth had conspired to draw them here to this moment. They had been chosen, not just as an observer, but as a participant in something far larger than themselves. They had stumbled upon the heart of Earth's most ancient secret, a secret that had been hidden for centuries, guarded by the very forces of nature themselves. The DeathWorlder tried to steady their breath, but their mind raced with questions. What had caused this? What was the origin of the force beneath the earth? Was it something the humans had feared, or had they once worshipped it? There were legends, stories of creatures born from the very core of Earth, beings of unimaginable power that could shape the world as they saw fit. But those were just stories, myths passed down through generations. Could they have been real? Could this be the reason why Earth was known as a death world? The ground trembled again, and this time the DeathWorlder couldn't ignore it. They had no choice but to run. The chasm before them was widening, and the tendrils were now fully visible, coiling upward like massive serpentine creatures. The storm raged above, as though the planet itself was preparing for battle. The DeathWorlder turned to flee, but something caught their eye. In the distance, a figure emerged from the shadows of the ruined city, a human. The explorers' breath caught in their throat as they recognized the silhouette. It was a human, but different. There was something about them that was wrong. The figure seemed to shimmer in the storm, their face obscured by the relentless rain. The DeathWorlder's instincts screamed for them to run, but their curiosity held them in place. The human moved toward them, slowly, purposefully, their eyes locked on the explorer. The closer they got, the more unsettling the figure became. There was an unnatural stillness in their movements, as if they weren't entirely human, or perhaps they were, but something had changed. Their very presence seemed to distort the air around them, warping the atmosphere in subtle ways that made the DeathWorlder's skin crawl. And then the humans spoke, their voice cutting through the storm like a knife. "You shouldn't have come here," they said, their words strangely calm in the midst of the chaos. "You were never meant to uncover the truth." The DeathWorlder's heart skipped a beat. The human's voice was like a whisper, but it carried the weight of something far greater, something that made the air around them feel thick, suffocating. The storm roared louder, and the tendrils from the chasm began to writhe more violently. The earth itself seemed to react to the figure, as if it recognized them. The DeathWorlder stepped back, their eyes darting between the human and the rising chaos, unsure of what to do next. What was happening? Who was this human? And what had they uncovered that had set everything into motion? The figure's lips curled into a smile, but there was nothing comforting about it. "You've awakened something," they said, their tone darker now. "And now it's too late to stop it." The DeathWorlder's blood ran cold as the figure raised a hand, pointing toward the chasm. The tendrils lashed out like whips, slamming into the earth, sending massive shockwaves through the ground. The storm raged in response, and for a brief moment, the DeathWorlder thought they might be swallowed by the chaos. But they didn't have time to think. Not anymore. The world was tearing apart around them, and the only question left was whether they could survive the truth of Earth's darkest secret. The figure's smile faded, and they slowly lowered their hand, as if sensing the growing tension in the air. The DeathWorlder's gaze flickered back to the chasm, where the tendrils continued to coil and strike with violent force. There was no mistaking it now. The planet itself was alive, reacting to the presence of the human, and whatever it was that had been awakened deep beneath the surface. But as the DeathWorlder stood there, trapped in a moment of paralyzing uncertainty, they felt something else stirring, something far darker than they had anticipated. The ground trembled again, but this time it wasn't just the chasm shifting. It was as though the entire planet was beginning to crack apart. A deep rumble echoed beneath their feet, and for the briefest of moments, the storm above seemed to pause, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Then came the roar, a sound so deafening it felt as though the very fabric of reality was being torn in two. It wasn't the wind, nor the thunder. It was the sound of something monstrous, something old and hungry, awakening for the first time in millennia. The DeathWorlder's heart raced as the air around them began to warp. It wasn't just the storm or the growing energy from the chasm, it was something more profound. The landscape was shifting, the earth itself bending and changing as though it were alive. The ground underfoot cracked open once again, and from the depths emerged not just the tendrils, but something else massive, towering shapes that loomed out of the chasm like titans risen from the abyss. The DeathWorlder's breath caught in their throat. These were no mere tendrils or twisted vines, they were colossal, living mountains of stone, their surfaces pulsating with an unnatural glow, their forms writhing in strange, alien motions. The storm intensified in response, the winds howling and lashing against the DeathWorlder with unrelenting force. The figure standing before them seemed unfazed by the chaos, their expression cold and unreadable, as if they had anticipated this moment for a long time. But even they couldn't hide the flicker of uncertainty that crossed their face as the titanic beings continued to rise from the chasm. It was as if even they knew that the true nature of what had been awakened was something beyond their control. The DeathWorlder stumbled back, unable to tear their eyes away from the towering creatures that now filled the sky. But as they stepped backward, the ground beneath their feet gave way, and they found themselves falling. Their body twisted in the air, the world spinning around them as the darkness of the chasm seemed to pull them in. In the last moment before they hit the ground, the DeathWorlder's hand shot out, grasping for something, anything, to stop their descent. A jagged rock outcropping appeared, and they clung to it, barely managing to catch themselves. Their heart pounded as they hung on the edge of the chasm, looking down into the depths. From below, a sickly green light pulsed in rhythm with the growing roar, growing louder and louder until it felt as though the very air was vibrating. It was as though the planet was alive, its heartbeat reverberating through the ground, through the storm, and into their very soul. They couldn't look away. They couldn't move. Everything they thought they knew about this world, this so-called death world, was slipping away. What was it that lay beneath? What had humanity, what had they been so afraid of? And then it hit them, a surge of understanding, a horrifying realization that sent a cold wave through their veins. The human before them, the one who had warned them, who had spoken so cryptically they weren't just here to observe. They weren't just a witness to the awakening. No, this human was part of it, a piece of the puzzle. The DeathWorlder's heart stopped for a moment as they pieced it together. The storm, the chaos, the titanic figures rising from the depths, it wasn't random. It had all been set in motion by this very human, by the force they carried, by whatever had tethered them to the ancient power buried beneath the surface. The human wasn't just a part of Earth's history. They were its key. They were the catalyst, the living embodiment of the very power that had been dormant for so long. You're part of this, the DeathWorlder managed to gasp, their voice barely audible above the roar of the storm. The human's lips twitched, the slightest hint of a smile returning to their face. But there was no warmth in it. "No," they replied softly, their tone chilling. "I'm not just part of it. I'm its chosen, its herald. And now, you're too late." Before the DeathWorlder could respond, a deafening crack split the air. From the chasm, a massive tendril shot up, wrapping itself around one of the titanic figures that had risen from the depths. The tendril tightened, and, with a horrifying groan, the creature's body began to twist and contort, its form being warped and reshaped as the tendril pulled it deeper into the chasm. The others followed, one by one, their immense forms bending to the will of whatever force lay below. The DeathWorlder's mind raced as they watched the scene unfold. The Earth was no longer just a lifeless rock, a death world of violent storms and dangerous creatures. It was a living, breathing entity, and humanity had, in some sense, been living on borrowed time. They had been unknowingly walking on the edge of a precipice, not just in terms of their survival, but in the very nature of their existence. The planet was changing, evolving, and they had awakened it. The air grew thick with tension, and the DeathWorlder realized they had no idea how to stop what was coming. They were only an observer now, an unwilling participant in a grand, ancient trauma that had been set into motion long before their arrival. But there was something else, something that had been nagging at the back of their mind ever since they had arrived. A strange, unsettling feeling that had only grown stronger with each passing moment. It wasn't just the power beneath the surface. It wasn't just the human in front of them. No, it was something else, something even darker. The DeathWorlder's eyes flicked to the chasm once again, and they saw it a fleeting glimpse of movement at the very edge of the darkness, something watching, waiting. And in that moment, they understood. Whatever was about to unfold wasn't just about the awakening of ancient forces. It was about the planet itself deciding its fate. And for the first time, the DeathWorlder understood why Earth was called DeathWorld. They had come too late to change its course. Chasm continued to tremble as the immense tendrils pulled the colossal figures further into the abyss. The ground beneath, the DeathWorlder's feet shook with each violent movement, and the wind howled like a living creature, the air heavy with tension. It was clear that Earth, the so-called Death World, was changing, but what the DeathWorlder had just realized was far more terrifying than they could have ever imagined. This wasn't just an awakening, it was a rebirth, a force greater than anything they had ever known, and it was inescapable. The human before them, the herald, stood unwavering, their eyes focused on the depths, knowing full well what was coming. The DeathWorlder could feel the pull of that power now, a magnetic force that seemed to come from the very core of the planet itself. Everything in the atmosphere seemed to have taken on a strange, unsettling rhythm, as if the planet's heartbeat was syncing with theirs. There was no escape. They were part of this now, whether they wanted to be or not. Suddenly, the ground beneath their feet cracked open, and the DeathWorlder stumbled, caught off guard by the sudden shift. A massive pulse of energy shot up from the chasm, blinding in its intensity. The DeathWorlder's heart raced, panic threatening to take hold. They had no idea what was happening, but one thing was certain: it was too late to stop it. Earth was no longer just a dangerous world to survive on. It had become something sentient, something ancient, something beyond human comprehension. But as the energy surged, something unexpected happened. The human, standing at the precipice, raised their hand, palm open, as if welcoming the destructive force that was emerging. There was no fear in their eyes, only calm resolve. For a moment, the DeathWorlder was struck by the sheer audacity of it. The human wasn't just a passive observer or a pawn in this grand cosmic play. They were the architect. They had known what was coming all along, and they had embraced it. "You don't understand, do you?" The human's voice was almost a whisper, carried away by the roaring winds, yet the DeathWorlder could hear every word clearly. "This isn't the end. This is the beginning. The planet isn't just waking up. It's evolving." The DeathWorlders' confusion deepened, their minds struggling to catch up with the magnitude of the words. What did they mean by evolving? How could Earth, a world they had once thought of as a brutal, untamed death trap, be more than just a planet? And what role did the human play in all of this? The human's gaze shifted to the massive tendrils still rising from the chasm, their writhing forms now illuminated by the strange greenish light radiating from below. You see, the Earth is more than just a death world. It's a crucible, a testing ground for something greater. The human's voice carried an edge of satisfaction now, almost as if they were reveling in the destruction unfolding before them. But the DeathWorlder wasn't listening anymore. Their mind was racing, piecing together the fragments of information they had gathered. The chasm, the tendrils, the titanic creatures emerging from the depths, the storm, the power that was awakening. It was all connected. But to what end? As if on cue, a deep, bone-shaking tremor ripped through the landscape. The air crackled with energy as a massive surge of power shot up from the heart of the planet, flooding the sky with a sickly green hue. It was then that the DeathWorlder understood. Earth wasn't just alive, it was a living organism, a vast, interconnected entity. The ancient force that lay beneath the surface wasn't a simple power. It was a consciousness, a mind that had been dormant for eons, waiting for the right moment to rise. And the human, the herald, was its chosen vessel. The DeathWorlder staggered back, their eyes wide with horror. You're part of it. You're not just a human. You're its chosen one, its key to awakening the planet. The human's lips curled into a smile, but it wasn't the same smile they had given earlier. This one was dark, knowing, and filled with a strange satisfaction. No, not just part of it. I am it. I am the one who will usher in the new era. The Earth will reshape itself, and with it, humanity will evolve. No longer bound to this fragile existence. No longer DeathWorlders. We will ascend. The DeathWorlder's mind reeled as they grasped the full scope of what was happening. The planet was about to undergo a transformation, and humanity would be at the center of it. But there was a chilling realization sinking in: this wasn't just evolution. It was domination. Earth would no longer be a world to conquer. It would become the master, with the human as its herald, and the DeathWorlder had become an unwilling witness to this cosmic shift. Just as the DeathWorlder opened their mouth to speak, to plead for mercy, the world seemed to shudder. A final, deafening roar came from the chasm, and in that moment, everything changed. The tendrils surged upward, their massive forms intertwining, pulling everything into the abyss. The titanic creatures screamed in agony, their forms twisting as they were consumed by the darkness below. But the human, the herald, stood tall and unshaken, eyes alight with the fierce glow of the power coursing through them. They raised their arms, and the storm above seemed to quiet, as if in reverence to the force now fully awakened. The DeathWorlder's heart raced as they realized the true scope of what had been set into motion. The human wasn't merely a participant in this transformation, they had become a part of the planet itself. The ancient power had fused with them, and now they stood at the apex of Earth's evolution, controlling it, bending it to their will. But then, just as everything seemed to fall into place, a new, chilling sound filled the air. A low, resonant hum, followed by a sudden shift in the wind. Something was moving beneath the surface again. A new force. A force that had been waiting all along. The DeathWorlder's breath caught in their throat as the ground shook once more. Only this time, it wasn't just the storm or the awakening creatures. It was something else, something even more ancient, more powerful than anything they had imagined. And as the human turned toward the chasm with a look of shocked realization, the DeathWorlder understood the final, terrifying truth. Earth had not just awakened. It had evolved into something that could not be controlled. And now, even the human, the herald, was no longer its master. They were just as much a part of the planet's unpredictable, chaotic nature as everything else. The true DeathWorld had arrived, and the DeathWorlder, for all their struggle, had become just another piece in the world's shifting puzzle. The final confrontation with the Galactic Empire had left everyone on edge, but it wasn't over. Even in the aftermath, the remnants of their assault on Earth lingered like a storm cloud, darkening the horizon. The tension was palpable, every decision carrying weight, every glance exchanged a silent acknowledgement of the heavy cost. But in that moment, amidst the chaos, a strange sense of calm settled over the surviving forces. The realization that humanity had endured, despite the overwhelming odds, was nothing short of miraculous. Earth, once seen as a death world by so many, had proved its resilience, its people refusing to bow down to a foreign empire that had underestimated their spirit. Yet, the question remained, why had the Galactic Empire underestimated humanity in the first place? What made Earth so unique, so powerful, that even the advanced alien species that had conquered countless planets could not subdue it? The answer, it seemed, was not in the technology, nor in the weapons of war, but in the heart of humankind itself. The ability to endure, to adapt, and to fight with a raw, undying passion was something that no galactic empire could ever fully comprehend. It wasn't just about survival, it was about the will to rise, no matter the cost. As the final wave of enemy forces retreated, the once shattered cities began to show signs of life once more. In the midst of the debris, humans stood tall, their eyes filled with hope and determination. The war, though devastating, had forged an unbreakable bond between them. They had come together, united by a common enemy, driven by a shared goal. And in doing so, they had proved that they could overcome anything, no matter how impossible it seemed. But with victory came the questions. What would they do now? What was the future of Earth, now that they had defended it so fiercely? And what would the consequences be for the Galactic Empire, which had finally learned the true power of this so-called Death World? The leaders of the Earth Alliance met in secret, discussing the implications of the war and the steps that lay ahead. There was a sense of resolve in the room, a belief that they had not only fought for their world, but for the future of all humankind. The fight had been won, but the true battle was just beginning. Across the galaxy, the defeat of the Galactic Empire sent ripples through the political landscape. Other worlds, once suppressed and silent, began to stir, emboldened by the fall of the Empire's mighty forces. Whispers of rebellion spread, and soon the galaxy was ablaze with the idea that freedom was not a distant dream, but a tangible reality. Earth had shown them that it could be done, that even the most formidable of enemies could be brought to their knees. And as humanity moved forward, rebuilding and securing its place in the cosmos, the legacy of their struggle lived on. The sacrifices made, the lives lost, the bonds forged in the heat of battle, these were the things that would define them. Earth had once been feared and misunderstood, but now it stood as a beacon of hope, a testament to the strength of the human spirit. But the journey was far from over. There were still mysteries to unravel, enemies to face, and unknowns lurking in the corners of the universe. The Galactic Empire, though defeated, was not entirely gone. Its remnants scattered like embers in the wind, waiting for the right moment to regroup, to strike again. In the days that followed, whispers of a new threat began to surface. A faction within the Galactic Empire, led by an enigmatic figure, had vowed to reclaim their lost power and punish Earth for its defiance. They believed that the human race was nothing more than a fleeting anomaly, a fleeting spark that needed to be extinguished before it spread any further. But this time, Earth was ready. The alliances that had formed during the war were stronger than ever, and the people who had once been divided by borders and differences now stood together as one. They knew that the fight for survival was never truly over. They had proven their worth, and they would do whatever it took to protect their world. As the human forces prepared for the next phase of their journey, they did so with a renewed sense of purpose. The future was uncertain, but there was one thing that was certain above all else. Earth would never again be seen as just another death world. It was a world that had been forged in the fires of conflict, a world that had learned the true cost of survival and the power of unity. And as long as there was breath in their lungs, humanity would continue to fight for the future they had earned.